All right. I've got to do my vocal exercises here.
That's actually terrible for your vocals.
Yes, yeah, it is. Yep, what I just did right there is really bad for your voice. So I was practicing so I would know not to do it. It's another episode of Logic Guy After Dark, the chat show where I talk to my friends and enemies. I'll let them self-identify who's who. My guest today is Skeptical Jody of Imperial News with a Z. Jody, how the heck are you?
I'm pretty good.
Great.
I will say, it's Imperial News with a Z, only on Twitter though. It's Imperial News without the Z. Or I think it's on Twitch as well with the Z. But on...
That's terrible branding.
Yeah, well, a part of it was... It's a pun on Rebel News, obviously, which is who I cover.
Great, and we're going to talk all about your favorite inter-left slap fights, like defund the police, and I'm also going to try and convince Jody that pop feminism is cultural pollution. So stay tuned for that. But first, we've got to get to Viewer Mailbag, where I'm going to play Viewer Mailbag music. This is not a segment I've ever done before or mentioned or thought about, but I did get some feedback. It's really quick. It won't take long. That I wanted to read on the show. This is in regards to my video Jesse Single versus Brett Weinstein and James Lindsay. And it says, if you unironically use obnoxious mocking voices like that, because I did it with Brett Weinstein, it generally makes you look and sound like a child whose opinions can be safely ignored. And that's from listener Muonium. And thanks for the feedback. I love when someone puts their tears in an envelope and sends them to me. Really fascinating stuff. More like moan-ium, am I right? Thanks for the riveting update. Make sure to tell me about your next big cry when like Chapo Trap House calls Lawrence Krauss a pedo or something. Imagine taking time out of your life to whine to a podcast because they lightly poked fun at your intellectual hero, Professor Dunning-Kruger. Can you believe this guy, Jody?
No. I mean, like, mockery is where it's at, you know?
This guy is... This Monium fella, they need to toughen up, man. They're not going to get very far in life with this attitude. This is every single Brett Weinstein stan I've ever encountered on online, because I deal with these dudes and literally they are all exactly the same guy. Everything I just said applies to all of them 100%. They are all the same guy.
It's a frustrating thing because I bet you actually had content there where you were critiquing Brett Weinstein. And it's like...
that's not necessarily a safe bet.
Oh, yeah. But I would say, like, what they do often is they'll say, like, how dare did you throw it, like, an insult at the end there? But it's like, sometimes an ad hominem isn't... Or, like, an insult isn't necessarily an ad hominem, because you actually had arguments to preface it. But then in the end, you're like, you're an idiot. And then that's, like... that's allowed, you know. Sometimes people are idiots, right. And you can point that out, you know, or mock them by having an insulting caricature.
Right. Well, it doesn't matter if I had sound arguments or not, because the Brett Weinstein fanatics never want to talk about that. They always want to talk about how you weren't living up to their standards of civil discourse. That is it. That is their favorite topic. They do not want to talk about anything else. What a bunch of losers. What a bunch of sad simps.
Yeah. Sad simps indeed. I can, I mean, I don't know how much disagreement or whether I fell into the enemy category or not, but for this, we're in agreement.
Yeah, absolutely, totally. And like I said, it's for you to decide if you're friend or foe. You know,
show's not over yet.
I think the best guests are a little of both, personally.
That's fair.
Yeah.
I mean, because you want a bit of a... I don't know, that leaves a bit of room for some, like, uncomfortable tension, but also some, like, agreement, you know?
Yeah. That's what last week's episode was with that account, Fooly Cooley, who's like a stupid poll personality. That's what it all was. It was all like, you know, a lot of tension and some bro downs, some real bro downs in the middle of some tension, you know, that... I'm telling you, man, it was our horniest episode ever. Let me put it that way. I'm gonna edit that part out.
No, you gotta leave that in. You can't kink shame yourself.
Right, yeah. Do you want me to start going over this argument that we had in group chats about pop feminism being cultural pollution? Is that a good starting place?
Yeah. Oh, that's a good starting place. I actually figured there's like I think the meta disagreement shares similarities with the other topic as well. So wherever we start is fine.
That's an exciting promise for things to come. Yeah. So my premise here is that we were talking about some of the 2016 post Gamergate style YouTubers, and my premise was that the BuzzFeed pop feminism of mainstream to left media, it has done much greater harm to the cause of feminism than, for instance, Shoe on Head videos or Chris Ray Gun videos. And here's I'm going to take you on a journey here, okay?
Yeah.
Our story begins in 2016. Or sorry, not 2016. May 2015. Okay. Now, I didn't know about this when we were arguing about this in group chats. I found out about this later, that in like spring, early summer of 2015, there was a minor dust up among a lot of like right-wing sites about people getting arrested in New York City for manspreading, for the crime of manspreading.
Were they getting arrested or just fined?
The story is there were arrests, manspreading arrests, specifically 2 men in New York City in May of 2015 were arrested for the crime of manspreading. And this was reported in, so you can find a Snopes.com article about it, and this was reported in Breitbart. It was reported in National Review. It was in Newsweek, which is now like a very right-wing publication. Yeah. But it found its way into New York Magazine. I found an article referencing it in Bustle, which is a feminist publication, and it all tied back to an article in Gothamist. So May 28th, 2015, in the Gothamist, which is like a left of center. I'm calling it like a left of center publication. This is the headline: Cops arrest subway riders for manspreading. And every article that talked about the story eventually linked back to this story from the Gothamist. Now, is this accurate? Well, here's what Snopes.com concluded. It's possible that 2 unnamed men were arrested in New York City for manspreading, but no details about the claim were made available in the original report or any other of the many later repetitions of it. Now, the article in Gothamist was pretty solid. The article isn't sensationalistic, and it's actually about something really important, which is about broken window policing in New York City and how it disproportionately affects, marginalized people, POC. The 2 guys who were arrested were Hispanic homeless people. So they're talking about, it's a story about broken window policing. The headline is 2 guys arrested on subway for manspreading, and that's the story. Most of people who heard about this heard about it through Facebook postings, right? So I look at that and I go, that's interesting. So the story dates back to a left-wing publication. Interesting.
So what? I guess what is your argument then? Like, are you if I could piece it together, are you saying that because this I can't remember what you named what they named wherever this article was written in. Are you saying that because it called it manspreading and then that got picked up by the sort of like right-wing media sphere, far-right media sphere, that there's somehow like a problem, I guess?
So what I'm saying is that the headline kind of clickbaity. If you actually accurately name the article, the name of the article would be, broken window policing in New York City or something about that. That would be a good article. That's basically the article they wrote. That's not the headline that they went with. And the result of this was to spread this, I'm going to call it misinformation. We don't 100% know it's misinformation. But the result of it was that it spread this misinformation throughout the internet, especially propagated by by right-wing sites, but not originating and not exclusive to them either. I'm going to read you the first sentence of the Bustle's article on this.
I just have one more clarifying question though. If I
yeah, go for it.
Which is that I'm not currently reading this or didn't investigate this claim or whatever.
Okay.
But it's like, if these two people actually were arrested and the reason given was mansplaining, or sorry, not
manspreading.
Manspreading.
Yeah.
And the reason given was manspreading. And like the police actually did that. Now Snopes, like, I don't know, they're saying that there is no documented case that this was manspreading or whatever. But maybe that's what the police told the individuals or something.
Right,
I don't know.
Yeah. That's the kind. And also there were other charges as well, including they didn't pay like fine. There was outstanding warrants for fines unpaid. That, you know, the stuff that's very typical of broken window policing.
Yeah. And again, like, I think the article, it seems beyond like whether or not we agree with like the use of manspreading being apt here, it seems more like there was an issue here that the article was genuinely trying to address in terms of this broken windows policing. That being said,
the article is responsible. I think it's the headline that's irresponsible. And as you know, like the people writing the headlines are not the people writing the articles, and oftentimes.
But do they mention manspreading in the article?
Yeah, they do, because I mean, you should read the story yourself, but it came up in court with the. It was an issue that was raised in court. Hold on, I'll do a quick search in it.
Because I was just gonna say, like, if they
nevertheless,
actually mention
the judge, instead of dismissing the midnight manspreading charge outright, issued what's known as an ACD, you know, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, it is brought up in the article, and the article is sourced from a report called the Police Reform Organizing Project, aka PROP, which is it's basically documenting broken window policing, and the term comes right from their report.
But then, if it came from the report, is the title really at issue here? Because it seems to me like what's at issue here is less the fact that they titled something, because like these two people were arrested for manspreading, if the facts in the article are correct. Then it seems like the problem is that how this was not accurately contextualized by the right-wing media sphere that like took this stuff. And I would argue, like, part of my argument going forward is like, you almost don't have control over that, because the right-wing media sphere is going to take whatever you do and try to spin it in a negative light. That's what they do, right?
Okay. So first of all, I want to address how the Bustle wrote about this. This is the first sentence from the Bustle, a feminist paper, a feminist website's article on this. If you're sick of men taking up too much room on the subway, you'll probably appreciate this news. At least 2 men in New York have been arrested for manspreading. Manspreading in quotation marks. Jesus fucking Christ, do not open your article with applauding broken window policing, a practice based on a discredited social theory that has contributed to horrendous police violations of homeless people and marginalized people. It is an abhorrent practice that no one should be writing that sentence about. To be fair, the rest of the article is not nearly that bad, but Jesus fucking Christ.
But in that sentence, like, because, you know, you just read it to me right now, I don't recall. Did they even mention broken windows policing in that sentence, though?
No, they didn't. There's no mention of broken window policing in this sentence, in this sentence from the Bustle.
Yeah. And, like, I realized that, like, it's kind of loaded, that it's almost, like, happy, at least from how you were reading it was almost happy that they got arrested or whatever, which seems like they're promoting broken windows policing. But without the connection back to the original article, I mean, like, I would still have problems with this Bustle article, for sure. But then it's like, is that because of, like, some cultural pollution? Or is that just, like, them doing a bad job, I guess?
I'm saying that this is a bad job. Just so no one thinks I misrepresent the article, I want to read the next sentence. But as annoying as it is, should people really be arrested for it? And then it goes on to bring up. I don't know if it uses the term broken window. No, broken window is not in here. But it brings up like why this
Racial
is not something
profiling.
to applaud. So I don't want to misrepresent the article. But back to the point about how it ended up in Breitbart. The title, 2 men arrested for manspreading, is a tiny segment of this prop report. In fact, it's made up of these things called vignettes, which are just like individual stories of people and their run-ins with policing. even in this individual vignette, it's a small part. They took this part out and made it the headline. Well, this is a guess on my part, because it's the most sensationalistic part of it. It's it takes something that is serious but kind of dry, police misconduct, it's not police misconduct. It's institutionalized harassment of homeless and marginalized people. But it's kind of dry, and it turns into something that's very culture war-y, The article about broken window policing probably wouldn't get as many shares on Facebook as this article ended up getting, would be my guess. And would Breitbart read into it and take that segment out and turn that into an article? They might, they might, but the Gothamist did a lot of their work for them by taking out that segment and putting it right in the headline, so that if you go, hey, is this true, and you click on the link at Breitbart or whatever, it takes you to an article with that as the headline. You go, oh, I guess it is true. This left-wing site has it right in the headline, and this made its way out of the right-wing ecosphere as well. I don't know if I mentioned that there's an article about it, source citing the Gothamist in New York Magazine. A bunch of places all over wrote about the arrest for manspreading. It was a very sensationalistic story.
How often do you glance at Breitbart, out of curiosity?
Back in 2015, quite frequently. I couldn't tell you the last time I glanced at Breitbart.
Because, I was just going to say, Rebel News does this kind of crap, all the time. Mm-hmm. And they always have Breitbart editors and writers on as guests. But one thing that they constantly do, I'll give you an example. Mm-hmm. There was a story recently from the UK that was headlined, man fell off ladder, was identified as a COVID fatality, right?
Okay.
And the right wing ran with this. I'm telling you, everyone. Breitbart talked about it. Daily Wire talked about it. Uh-huh. Rebel talked about it.
It had a sensationalistic headline, it sounds like.
Yes, man fell off ladder, was classified as COVID.
Do you know where it was from originally?
I think I traced it back to a Daily Mail article.
Okay, so that's a right wing site. So the right wing has found this, focused on the story, and this is their framing because it helps their anti-COVID denial or their COVID denial spin. So this comes from within the right. Okay.
But here's where things get complicated though, because even when you read the Daily Mail article, and here's the thing, my point of when I was researching was not to trace it down. So I actually don't know if at the bottom of the barrel was the Daily Mail, but that's at least where I sourced it back to, where I was I now have sufficient enough information about this story, because I think there was a Guardian article connected to it as well. But the point being is what happened was if you even read the Daily Mail article and you get down into the weeds of this story, the man who fell off the ladder, he was a 50-year-old man. When they brought him to the hospital and he was dead, they found out that it wasn't the fall that had killed him. It wasn't the attempts at resuscitation, because that can often cause damage. What they found was he had a mass in his lungs that was related to his COVID infection.
When he had COVID for 154 days. I Googled it just real quick. He had COVID-19 for 154 days.
And the thing is, he might not have known or whatever, and they didn't find out he had it till he fell off. But it's one of these things where it's a freak thing, but it actually was a COVID-related fatality. But what the right wing did with that was run it as if this is one of those cases where someone clearly died not due to COVID, and therefore they're inflating their numbers, and it's a giant conspiracy of some sort, right? But then it's to what extent is that contingent on the Daily Mail, who actually, when you get into the weeds of their stories, our story wrote the facts correctly? And I'm not here to praise the Daily Mail, because obviously they screw up their facts consistently. But the point is if I feel the right wing is going to use the details of these things, no matter what. No matter what, they're just going to find a way to spin these things and take it to promote their own narratives, right? And the 51-year-old falling off the ladder is a good way to do that.
The right-wing media machine is going to produce right-wing content. That's what we expect. So a story about a guy who had COVID for 154 days and then falls off a ladder in the hands of the right becomes guy who fell off ladder attributed to COVID-19 death, right? Like, so that's them creating their spin. But imagine if that headline appeared at on HuffPo. Like, wouldn't that give you like pause? Like, why is HuffPo writing clickbait headlines that make it sound like COVID numbers are being inflated? Wouldn't you that strike you as like a very odd thing to do?
It's complicated.
Like, strategically it makes sense from Rebel News, but it doesn't strategically make sense from HuffPo.
Yeah, but
it's
it depends.
weird.
Like, they might not even be thinking about it really. Like
Well,
I don't know.
So you're suggesting that the bad headline was written accidentally?
Well, like, I don't even know that it's a bad headline. Like, you can ask yourself, is it factually accurate? Yes, man who fell off ladder was ruled to be like a COVID fatality. Is that incorrect?
I have to take issue with you a big way, because the information we put in the headline directly impacts how people perceive the story. I mean, by design, way more people read a headline than read a story. So what we don't want is to put facts that are true but are presented in a misleading way in the headline. The people who do this, the people writing those headlines, are doing it very intentionally most of the time. They're not just, here are some words that fit in the space necessary. They're using SEO principles to build a headline that creates a narrative for itself. It creates a hook for you to want to read the article, but more importantly, share the article.
No, I agree with you to a certain extent here. Like, they're going to try to find some way to push. I mean, they want to draw clicks to the article rather than, they don't really necessarily care if someone reads it the whole way through. They just want to drive clicks for the ad revenue and all that fun stuff, right? Like, I 100% like understand like where their profit motive thinking for having these sort of like headlines comes from, and to sensationalize and all that fun stuff, right? But but my point is, like, there is still a limit. Like, I mean, even Daily Mail gets laughed at because sometimes their titles are like chapter lengths, or you know what I mean? Like, there is still some sort of like threshold of like a coherent title where it's like the manspreading story. You could argue that like probably they chose manspreading to specifically be in the title because they thought that this is like a cultural issue that's going to draw some eyeballs to the page. But then at the same time, it's like, it's incumbent upon the reader or incumbent upon other people who want to talk about it to actually address the points in the thing. And if the right-wing media then swoops in and just takes the headline and then spins a whole bunch of bullshit, why is that the fault of like the left? And I don't even know if the people who create the titles on these things are thinking in terms of left-wing politics, or rather just in terms of trying to create clickbait. You know, like, I guess, like, I wonder what, like, the motives are going on here as well.
So I don't think that anyone on the left should be blamed for the right spreading misinformation. But when the sensationalistic element comes from the headline of a left-wing article, I got to scratch my head a little bit. And to be fair, I'm using this as an introduction because I think it's an early case of me, like, kind of scratching my head and going, that's interesting. But I think that this case could potentially be just sort of a poorly chosen headline. It's not necessarily obvious to me from this. I think that the person who worked on the article wrote a legitimate article. Then there's a headline that makes it about two men arrested for manspreading, which isn't an accurate representation of the information in the article. The article is about broken window policing. But, you know, maybe there's an innocent explanation for it. But it seems to it's an early example. It's a proto example. You know, it's a missing link perhaps. But what I started to see emerge shortly thereafter looks less like an innocent mistake and more like a media strategy to me. I want to talk about another article that I noticed. Actually, it's from May of 2015 also. This one I actually did read when it came out. And it caught my attention. It's from The Cut, which is, again, like a pretty left of center.
Yeah, I don't know that much about The Cut. I like to claim that it's left of center or not. But they did that one video that went viral recently as well, which is Was that not the impetus for our conversation in the chat? I can't remember.
I don't know what video you're talking about.
I feel like it's one where they talk about like what privilege do white people have or something like that.
Oh, I actually don't recall talking about this with you.
Maybe not. I know it made the media rounds because I know like Hassan did a stream on it and stuff like this.
What was the name of it?
It had some. I can't remember the exact question. It had something to do with privilege and why do white people think they're privileged or something like this. And then it had a bunch of people of color addressing that question.
Okay, I know that this website did one that was like an excerpt from a book that was written between two women who are friends. One of them, I'm going to say, was black. The other was white. And the excerpt from the book was about how to be friends when you're from different races. And the excerpt from the book was about how the white lady invited the black lady to a party that didn't have any other black people there, and she had like a fit about it. It was like total. It doesn't matter. We don't need to talk about that. But it was pretty clickbaity, honestly. But this is an article from May 2015, and it's called "What Open Marriage Taught One Man About Feminism." I'm gonna read a quick excerpt from it. She didn't present it as an issue of feminism to me. The guy's talking about his wife. She didn't present it as an issue of feminism to me, but after much soul searching about why the idea of my wife having sex with other men bothered me, I came to a few conclusions. Monogamy meant I controlled her sexual expression, and not to get all women's studies major about it, patriarchal oppression essentially boils down to a man's fear that a woman with sexual agency is a woman he can't control. So he decided for feminism that he had to become a cuck. This article I read this article, and now at this time in my life, I was learning about the alt-right, and one of the things that I most noticed, that most was noticeable to me, was their use of this term cuck, which had not quite emerged into the national conversation. It was still very much a term owned by the alt-right that was exclusive to them. And I was encountering this term online. I was like, man, the mentality behind A, learning all about cuckoldry, and then B, like developing some fixation about it where you work it into everyday conversation just seems totally bizarre and alien to me. What a weird thing. How particular to their particular pathology. And then this article comes out, and it seems like it's tailor-made to reinforce everything the right is saying. Feminism wants you to be cucked. Feminism wants to take your dick away. Every trope that you could ask for is in this article. And when you go into the comments of this article, the presumably left of center people, what are they saying about it? They're like, this article is weird. This is not feminism. This isn't ethical polygamy. This is kind of an abusive relationship. It's weird that you wrote this article. So I look at this and I go, who is this article for? I don't understand who the audience is, and I don't understand why it was run.
I might have some hot takes here.
Oh wait, I'm sorry. I'm gonna send you a link to it. I should have done that last time because I can send links in the. I forgot I can do that.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know if I have time to read the whole thing. I'm more curious about the question of, because there's an issue about to what extent this relationship. I won't have time to read this to comment about the comment I'm gonna make. It's more just the general tone. If people came away from this thinking that it was abuse or whatever, because part of me is I'm sitting here listening to you going, wait, what's wrong with this? And maybe that's my hot take. But I see nothing wrong with what you just described to me, and not only that, maybe if it's, I mean, I can't read from how you described it to me whether it actually is abuse or not. Because you can understand one way. The one way that I would say it is abuse is if somehow the cuckoldry that occurred was the sort of result of some sort of loss of autonomy in the man, that somehow she forced this upon him in some sort of way. It would be different if it was an argument that was made and he came to a realization and changed his mind. That seems less abusive to me. But of course, it depends on how much you read into that based on what this article is going to say.
So the article does mention that the guy is unemployed and stays at home, and the wife is the one who pays the bills. So he is dependent on her financially. Yeah, I mean, I guess we'd have to read the article to have like an in-depth discussion about it. But I mean, to be honest, that's less important. But what is significant to me is that I started to see this, what looked to me like a media strategy of putting out. Felix Biederman, Chapo Trap House, has called it write something that everyone hates. Like that seems to me to be like the media strategy for a lot of this content. And the one that I referenced that set the chat off was a Mashable.com video piece from 2019 originally. I think it was August 2019, called the manspreading chair. The anti-manspreading chair. And the anti-manspreading chair is ostensibly a pro-feminist article about this student furniture designer who invented a chair and won an award for combating manspreading. And the video has I think it has 3 or 5 million views, and it has only downvotes. It's like ratioed beyond, it's buried under its ratio. Everyone seems to hate this video. I've literally never seen anyone be like, hey, what an informative video. Thanks for, I've learned something about the manspreading chair. How edifying. The feedback seems to me to be entirely negative. And what really strikes me as like very odd about this is they keep retweeting it. So it came out, I think, in August. Then they retweeted it again in November. And then they retweeted it again in sometime in 2019. So they keep wanting to remind us of this video they made about the anti-manspreading chair that literally everyone hates. And I look at that and I go, the only reason that they would want to keep reminding us of this video is if they consider that the video performed well. That's the only explanation that would make sense to me.
I have a hint at a different explanation, and it might actually get to some of our disagreements here. So I'm just like thinking through, because even your framing in the dude from Chapo had to say, which was like, they want to write something that people hate. And part of me goes like... He
wasn't talking specifically about this story.
No, I know. Just like the idea that there's this genre of writing something that people hate.
Yeah.
But then I'm like, why do people hate some of these? So getting back to like the Cuck article, why do people hate this thing? And part of it is, this is why there is like feminism, which is the idea of like, if patriarchal structures are the norm, then you want to critique them. And if you critique them and they're the norm, then of course you're going to get a lot of blowback for that criticism. So if you're critiquing the sort of like familial structure, or like the structure of marriage, the hierarchy involved in marriage, you're going to have a lot of pushback from that, from a culture that perceives monogamy in terms of a man and a wife in a marriage as the societal norm, right? And so it's like, why might they be motivated in doing that? Is maybe they're motivated because they want to try to get rid of this norm, suggesting that it's not an innate characteristic in us that we should be monogamous, but that it's a social structure. It's a cultural thing that we have applied on ourselves. And maybe we would be much happier if we reconsider it or think outside of this structure. Which is what feminism is trying to do, right? And here's the thing, is like maybe you go, they're still wrong in some capacity. Maybe that's your conclusion. You still think the feminist is wrong in this critique, which very well could be the case. But the flip side of that is, of course the right wing is going to be mad at an article like this. Of course they are, because they're the ones that are way more.
It was more than the right wing that hated this video.
Sure, but you tried to link this quasi to this use of the word cuck or whatever, the fascination with this term. And part of what I'm getting at is like, the right wing is clearly going to be opposed to this because they're the ones that hold on to these hierarchical norms. That's why they're all right. That's why they're conservative. So of course they're going to see this as like, using the term that you wanted to describe with this, like, as cultural pollution to them. To them, it's it's this icky thing. Like, how dare they even suggest these kind of things? And so that's why, like, I'm curious to you, like, why?
I want to point out that the right actually doesn't regard these articles as pollution, quote unquote, because they're frequently the ones spreading them on social media and having their articles, writing articles about them. Like for instance, the Gothamist article came from the Gothamist, but who was spreading it throughout the online ecosphere? It was the right. They're actually
but why are they spreading it?
Because they think that it proves something right about their worldview. So it's very useful to them. That's why they spread it. It's very useful to them. As a leftist, this stuff is not useful to me. This stuff is actually damaging to me.
But why is it useful to them?
Because it reinforces something about their worldview. So in the case of...
No, it's so that they can point to it. It's so they can point to it and go, look at these degenerate leftists.
Yeah, right. That's the same thing as what I said. Like you phrase it differently, but it's the same thing. Natalie Wynn coined a term, mascotization, right? So basically, you create an image that you turn your opponents into a caricature of themselves for the purpose of ridicule. And this is actually an idea that comes from, I'm not saying he invented it, but it comes from Saul Alinsky. He talks about this. In Rules for Radicals. The 13th rule is, I'm going to paraphrase it, turn people into mascots for the thing you hate. And it's an incredibly powerful and in the wrong hands dangerous rhetorical tactic because it works.
Yeah, but how do you control that though? Like let me give you an example.
I can think of a really easy way to control it.
We're talking about cuckoldry, we're talking about trans stuff, we're talking about women's rights, all in the context of today. But if you go back in time and you had someone go free the slaves, you would have right-wingers at that time going, look at these leftist degenerates actually thinking black people are people.
I don't know what the point of the slavery analogy is. It's like let's just stick to now. It's like, this is confusing enough.
No, it's not confusing. Why would we let the right wing dictate our politics or how we talk about them when they're going to perceive us even talking about them as being morally degenerate?
Why do you think that's what I'm suggesting? That's not the point I'm making at all. Like,
okay, then explain further. And well, like, let me probe just so that like I can reach the clarification, because when you refer to it as like cultural pollution or it's having some sort of negative effect on the left, it makes it seem to me like, and the fact that you keep pointing to the right wing and going, well, look at how they're reacting.
I'm not pointing to how they're reacting. I'm pointing to the fact that it emboldens them, that people agree with it. Because when people hate the manspreading chair, it's not just the right. It's a lot broader than that.
But of course people are going to be more conservative. They tend to be more conservative. Do you think that hating the manspreading chair is conservative? I don't see it that way at all. You know why people hate the manspreading chair? I don't know about the manspreading chair. What about
the frivolous? It's dumb. Manspreading's not a real problem. It's something created by the media that they use to push these stories. But people, if you talk to real people in the world, they're not telling you that they have a problem with manspreading. It's just some fake media thing.
I'm not going to get into the details of manspreading. Like let's focus on this cuckoldry thing then.
Okay.
Like if in this case, right? Okay, like say if I even agree with you, like manspreading is like just a silly thing. So like maybe there are
the cuckoldry thing.
I know, but I'm just like framing like there possibly could be some things that I'll get on board with you and say it's frivolous. Maybe I'll say that.
Okay.
But in the case here, I don't see what is frivolous about this. In the same way that manspreading is. So
I said the manspreading chair was frivolous. This is actually I think this article is quite a bit worse than frivolous, because what it links feminism to man-hating. Because the guy, I mean, I guess you kind of have to. I thought that excerpt I read sold it, but maybe not. But the guy in this article comes off as such a pathetic sad sack, and he makes it clear throughout the article that he's threatened he doesn't want to have an open marriage, but he has to. And why? Because of feminism. So if you want to, this has nothing to do with my politics or the politics of feminists. I know they're not advocating. They don't think men have an ethical duty to enter into polyamorous relationships because monogamy is about controlling women's bodies. The feminists I know are in monogamous relationships. This is completely divorced from any kind of leftist values that I encounter in real life or the values of the people I know. This is some weird niche article about some unhealthy marriage that writers and editors have decided to link to feminism.
So there's a lot of stuff that you just said there, right?
Mm-hmm.
You called it niche. You called the dude pathetic. Like, you're ascribing all these qualities to it that I'm not sure exist in the article itself. And like, especially like when you're using the words like pathetic and stuff like that. So we can get to that as one separate thing. And then the other thing is like referring to this as niche. It's like, yeah, feminism is going to deal with some like niche topics. I'm not saying that this is, again, I haven't read it, so I might have qualms in terms of like how feminist it really is.
I didn't think we would spend so much time on it, so I didn't think to send it to you. It would have been a good thing to do.
I think even the periphery like makes sense to me, just in the sense of like, again, whether this is the appropriate niche that we should be spending time on. I could put that one to the side and like focus on the fact that you read this and you're reading it in terms of like, this person is pathetic. And it's like, to me, you're ascribing your own sort of standards of what masculine behavior should be. And you're saying that this person is not living up to it because he's like emasculating himself in the presence of this woman who wants an open relationship. And she might have defended her open relationship by using feminism, and maybe he agreed to it, but you're saying that somehow he was coerced by her, and I don't know if that's the case here. Because there's also like, I just even like when I glanced at the screen, there's a line here where he goes, "That was 2 years ago, and today we've never been happier. More in tune, closer, tighter, stronger. Whatever power I surrendered, I don't miss. I wouldn't recommend it for everyone, but I tell everyone it works for us." What if it does work for them?
Yeah, I mean that's great if it works for him, but that's not the picture he paints in the story. I have no quarrel with. I'm really not a big advocate of monogamy myself, but this is a story about a guy who. This is a story about a guy who got coerced into something, ostensibly because he believes it's feminist. But what is laid out in the article has nothing to do with feminism. But I mean, that's my personal response to it. My point about this article has more to do with its role in the cultural conversation. This is an article that seems to reinforce right-wing narratives and have nothing really to do at all with left-wing narratives, which would, I would assume, present feminism as liberating, empowering, and for the betterment of all people, not just a woman with a husband who lacks self-confidence.
This is like what I don't get. Like, this article in ways could be liberating to people. It's telling that you should not be bound to this monogamous structure that's been imposed on us, mostly through patriarchal religions that have like forced us into this thing and has been culturally like passed on. And like that.
The difficulty for me is I can imagine such an article. I just don't think that this is the one. I'm not against articles that advocate polyamory or polygamy. This is an article about a guy whose wife talks him into doing it. I don't know. I mean, I don't want to go into the weeds what does that mean? Since you haven't read the article.
Have you ever changed your mind?
Oh, of course I have.
Well, then, like, what do you mean talks them into it? I mean, you're implying that he shouldn't want to agree with the things that she brings up. What if he listened to her and was like, "Holy shit, that makes sense"?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's possible without having read the article. I can just tell you that is miles away from my own reading of this article. But I mean, this didn't get that much, cult. I don't know. I stand by my reading of the article. I mean, maybe if you read it in depth, maybe you'd take a different position. But I've
seen the right, like, even like, so not this article. I've seen other articles that I would describe as like less on the fence, even if this is on the fence. I haven't read it, whatever. Let's say like there's an article, I've seen articles out there where I read it and I'm like, this is just talking about open marriages in a way that's critical and like interesting and brings up feminism in the context because it is a feminist issue, I think. Mm-hmm. So it goes through that. I've seen right-wingers use those articles to talk about how like the left is degenerate. Like no matter what, the right is going to be angry at these pieces. And this was the reason I made the analogy with the free the slave thing. Because back then, it's like, these are just the issues that the right is against. So it's like, it doesn't matter how it's framed. And of course, they're going to like...
We kind of went down the weeds about like my personal objections, which I agree are just subjective and you might disagree. But I never saw this article shared by people on the left. I never saw this article shared by feminists. I saw this article shared by right-wingers. Not a ton, to be fair. This wasn't one of like the big ones that really blew up. But it seemed to, I looked at this article and I said, the audience for this article is the people in alt-right forums talking about cucks. That's who this is for. That's who is edified by what's in this article. It's certainly not feminists, and certainly not the husbands of feminists who consider themselves feminists. This is content that's for the right, and I see it. It's true with the manspreading chair. It's true with the strawberry dress that is a little bit fascist from Jezebel. Again and again, you see the left-wing publications publish this stuff that seems like everyone on the left doesn't really like it. It seems like the people clicking on it and sharing it, it seems like it's out to get hate clicks, is the succinct way of saying it. And it gets hate clicks at the expense of feminism and the left and, good left to liberal values. It seems like it's there so people can hate click on it.
So I have something to say to that then, because like there might be a point of agreement here. Like I don't know, I think because again I don't know that much about the Cut to say that I know that this is a left wing magazine of some kind.
But it's not a right wing. It's not.
No. Yeah, like, but what I'm saying is like. Is there liberal feminism that I might have a disagreement with and that I might think comes at things in a silly manner?
I don't think this is liberal feminism, dude.
Well, I don't know that either. Like, I don't know what the Cut is. I'm just saying that like there's a degree of like.
No, I'm saying the article doesn't represent liberal feminism. I don't think that that's a correct representation of it.
My point is that there could be some of these articles that do fit that thing, and there's a question of like, because if you say, because the other flip side of this is, to what extent can we know what you just argued is true, right? What would count as evidence where I would change my mind and go, you know what, Dan, you've convinced me, is like if we had the metrics showing what the reader base of this thing was.
Right, yeah.
And like I don't have access to the Cuts.
No, I agree with you. That would be, I don't claim that this is something I can prove, but if I were trying to prove it, that would be it. I'm going to read a sentence from this. I am an economically dependent house husband coping with the withering drudgery of child rearing. Now I understand the reality of that situation. I don't blame women for demanding more for themselves than the life of the housewife. Jesus fucking Christ, dude. You sound like a miserable sad sack. That is horrible. That's a horrible way to describe yourself.
The funny thing is, like, so right now, I am currently unemployed. I was unemployed right before. Well, I guess I make some money off my Patreon or whatever. Mm-hmm. But I'm currently unemployed, but I also have 2 kids that I raise while my wife is the breadwinner currently. So there's like an aspect of this. And I think there's an element of it that seems a little bit self-deprecating. Like what did he refer to it as, drudgery or something like I think you just read?
Yes.
Like there's a weight to it that I think is like a bit much. Like, but here's the thing: is like,
have you ever referred to yourself as an economically dependent house husband? Have you ever used that collection of phrases?
No, I think I've like referred to my wife as the sugar mama right now.
See, that's a normal thing to do. If he had written that, everyone would be like, "Oh, I get it. This relationship makes sense."
But this is why it strikes me as liberal. Like that just seems like wordy and highfalutin. Of like
the question is to me is it liberal? The question is it to me is this is clearly not a right wing article and in what's clearly not a right wing publication. Why are they publishing content that seems to appeal to right wing sensibilities? In my opinion.
Yeah, but that's again, it's your opinion. Like, I'd love to see the Cut statistics to know for a fact like what the readership is. Like, who knows? Like, but part of it is like I don't know if it's in their head even when they produced it. I'm like, we're definitely by writing this.
I think that's naive.
You think?
I think that's naive, man.
So just to be clear, you think that the Cut is sitting there going, we're gonna get a lot more shares. If we make it this way, the right wing's going to share it, and that's going to line our pockets. So therefore, we got to create this content that the right wing hates, and they'll spread it. Here's what I think they're doing.
Here's exactly what I think they're thinking. This will get hate clicks. that when they hit publish on this, I think that the intention behind it was this will generate hate clicks. And the thing you said about metrics is absolutely true, and we don't have them with this. But with the manspreading share from Mashable, we do have metrics. It got 5 million views. It was 3 or 5 million. It got millions of views, and almost all of the YouTube comments are negative. Almost it got ratioed on Twitter. It got downvoted on YouTube. The response was overwhelmingly negative. So we do have some metrics on that, and it shows that that the people who were interacting with this didn't like it, that they had a negative take on it. And yet they kept retweeting it. You don't think that's a little suspicious to get this overwhelmingly negative response and to just keep retweeting it 2 more times? Doesn't seem odd to you?
How does that benefit them?
How does people clicking on their content benefit them? They have a pay-per-click model, probably.
Yeah, but how does it benefit them in the long run? Do you think all those hate watchers are going to come back?
I don't think it does benefit them in the long run. I think it's a very short-sighted strategy, and I think that one of the long-term effects is that it decreases like reader trustworthiness. But I think there's another side effect that I don't think they were specifically conscious of, which is that when you are getting hate clicks, you have a business model of hate, and it's not exactly surprising that correlates with a rise of online hate movements. I don't think that's a coincidence. I think that one of the unforeseen byproducts of this was that it was giving fuel to the far right, and it emboldened them and it radicalized them. Or I think it was used as fodder to radicalize them, let me put it that way, by people who did know what they were doing, like Steve Bannon.
I mean, part of this is like, again, we're not in the heads of the cut. What if the cut was sincere when they did this? What then?
I mean, it's possible. Well, I can't prove that they didn't, but so often, I have a folder on this. So often, the publications put this stuff out. One of my favorite examples is the New York Times ran an article in 2018 called "Who's Allowed to Wear a Black Panther Mask?" And it was all about if letting your white kids play with Black Panther toys is racist. They could not find anyone to convincingly argue it, so the whole article just sort of meanders around. But that article got tons of blowback, and their response wasn't to stand by their article and say, no, this is why we picked that headline. Their response was to change the headline. It strikes me that when they get blowback on this stuff, they don't seem to stand by it. They just seem to cave into pressure, which leads me to believe that this isn't something they're doing with a lot of like thoughtful intent. It's something that is just chasing a hate click algorithm in a very short-sighted media strategy. That's what I make from it.
I think when you say that it's thoughtless, that is exactly what I'm trying to say, but I think the thoughtless manifests itself in like misplaced sincerity. Like I haven't read like all these articles you've read.
What
but
I said is that it didn't come from a thoughtful place, but I do think it was done with intent. Maybe that doesn't make sense, but that's the hair I'm splitting.
All of this is like how would we ever figure this out though? How would we ever figure this out?
I mean, are you just saying that we can't prove it, so let's not worry about it? Because I mean, I'll admit that I can't prove it.
Yeah, but it's kind of like, what can we do about that?
Is the question, can we prove it, or is the question, what can we do about it? Because the first one is a complicated question that I can't answer. The second one is very simple to answer.
They're kind of entangled in a weird way, and I'll put it this way. If you're right, what we would do about the problem is going to be different than if they're actually sincere.
Okay, you know what? I agree with that. They are different, because the solution, if they're not, is to simply, one, for these publications to just stop publishing this garbage and publish relevant things.
And I can pause there of just saying, if what they're doing is purposefully trying to like mess with knowing that the right wing is going to pick this up just so they can get a bunch of click views.
I'm saying that they're hate clicks. I'm not saying they necessarily are thinking about who is hate clicking on it. Just that they're generating hate clicks. I think they know that.
We're purposely going to craft hate clicks.
Yep.
I will agree with you. That's a really bad tactic for people to do, and I would encourage them to stop doing it. So I'll agree right there. But then you can go on to your second point.
And the second thing is that us, the audience, the end user, what we can do is not support this stuff, is find publications that we trust and share that stuff and resist the urge to hate click and share and dunk on it. And I'm as guilty of that as anyone. But what we've got to do is we've got to amplify the voices on the left that matter, that have relevant things to say. You know what's interesting? Back to the manspreading chair. Oh, do you want to comment on that at all?
No, I mean, I still don't know what to necessarily do in the case where they're sincere. I mean, because, like, I agree with you again. Like, the second solution you had there would work in the case that I know that they're, like, spreading this stuff purposefully. Okay. And, like, here's the thing is, like, I don't read any of these articles, so I guess I'm already doing your solution.
None of us read the articles. We just see them retweeted on Twitter. That's it.
I don't even reshare them. I just ignore this kind of shit. But like, my point is, like, if it's sincere, like, I don't know. Part of me, if this person is sincere who wrote this cut article, and there's like some of the things that you would tell, I think that's an interesting thing to, like, culturally digest. I'm curious what this dude has to say.
But there's a difference there, because there's the writer of the article, yes, but then there's also the editor. And in some cases, the editor actually matters more, because the editor isn't just deciding what to run. The editor is also assigning pieces, right? He's saying, oh, we want to run this and we want it to be from this angle. So when I see stuff like did you ever see that Independent article? The Joker is like my ex-boyfriend. Like, that to me is like a very, again, it can't prove anything, but that is a very editorial driven article. I doubt a young woman came to the Independent and pitched them her article idea, the Joker is like my ex-boyfriend.
Yeah, I mean, like, I don't know. Like, again, I don't know. We're not reading these people's heads. But yeah, I could tell, like, especially if it came out around the same time as Joker, there's probably some, like, confluence there. Or what happened was they already had an article. My guess is they already had an article written. And then, my guess is they already had an article written. And then the editor was like, well, the Joker's out. So, like, why don't you throw in some links to the Joker?
I don't think so. The article was all about the Joker. I don't think there was. I think if you take the Joker out, I'm not sure how much is left. Yeah, I think the idea was to have a hot take about the Joker coming out, and they're like, okay, well, I don't know, the Joker's like your ex-boyfriend, basically.
But if someone wants to write that article, like, why not let them write the article? Like, I don't know.
But this is what I was saying. Do you think that a young writer came to the editor with the story, or do you think the editor was like, okay, we need some Joker hot takes. Here's what we need it to be about, how the Joker's toxic masculinity. We need the Joker's toxic masculinity hot takes. I think it's very much the latter.
If it's the latter, I guess what's your problem? What's your problem with that?
If it's driven by the editor. If it's driven by the editor, then what I would say to the editor is stop chasing hate clicks. Write relevant things, write informative things, write things that people want to read. I want to take that point and bounce on to something. If you Google manspreading chair, then you see countless articles about this chair and the creator of it, whose name is Leala Laurel, and she is the 2019 winner of the Belmont Award for New Design, I think it's called. Yeah.
Oh, hell yeah. That's a sick chair.
Hold on. It's actually a hideously ugly chair. Okay.
I know. That was the joke.
Yeah. Which is very relevant to my point, because my question is, who is the winner of the 2018 Belmont Award for New Design?
I don't know. The Man Engorger chair. Sorry.
It had nothing to do with that. Her name is Toni Packham, and if you Google her, there's almost zero media about her. And what her project was, she's a young woman of color, by the way, and what her project is about is creating things out of a material called plastic glomerate, which I learned about by reading about her and her work that is actually really quite beautiful. She makes, like, ceramics and knife handles and things like that. And I look at her and, like, this is, like, very creative. It's interesting. I'm learning about things. I like the work as opposed to the manspreading chair that is hideously ugly. This is creative. It's innovative. It's beautiful. And she was completely ignored by the media in favor of some white lady with her dumb complaining about manspreading, which received a media blitz. That's shameful.
So I stumbled upon a BBC article with the manspreading chair woman, And
Yep.
there's a quote of her saying, "I don't take myself too seriously because I really want my work to be both important and thought-provoking,
Well, good
whilst
for her.
also being engaging and funny. I think humor is a really interesting tool in order to tackle social issues." So the question is, like, did she make this chair because she thought it was going to be like a fully beautiful functional chair, or was it an art project inspired both by her feminism but also by the joke in creating such a silly chair?
I mean, I can definitely see a lot of humor in the project. I don't deny that.
So what are we arguing about here?
I also think it's a hideously ugly chair, and I think that the reason the media gave so much attention
And what was my initial reaction upon seeing it?
upon seeing
I
the chair,
guffawed. I guffawed a lot.
right? Yeah.
Intention received on my end.
Yeah. But I think that the reason that her chair received so much media attention and other winners of the same award received none is because there's no culture war angle to creating ceramics out of plastiglomerate.
Sure, but like culture and art go hand in hand. Like, of course people are going to create culture like this.
I said culture war, though. I said there was no culture war angle to this. Like, we can't get in a dumb internet fight over cool ceramics that are made from material found in Hawaiian beaches.
Right, but why is it an item of the culture war? I mean, like, a part of it is like, it's because it touches on these issues having to do with hierarchical structures and about men and men's roles in society and like these things. Ceramic might not necessarily hit that vibe at this point, unless the ceramic is made in a way to emasculate the male.
There is nothing culture war about plastiglomerate, but it is actually a really interesting substance that you should
Sure.
Google and find out about and take a look at her work. Of Tony Packham, 2018 winner of the Belmont Award. But I disagree that the man-spreading chair comments on hierarchy and the status quo in any meaningful way. I think it's just entirely some made-up, media-driven narrative that doesn't actually connect to anyone's life in any real way.
No. So I wasn't saying that it necessarily comments on that. Maybe it does tangentially. But like, what if the intent was to do a silly art project inspired by this cultural thing? Because manspreading was a thing that like everyone heard about. Like, that thing went viral as hell, right?
Yeah, I mean, it received a lot of media attention. That would be correct, yes.
Yeah, because there was that initial video that showed the people on the train or whatever. I remember it was like from Sweden or something. I can't even remember.
Well,
But there was,
I know the one. I know the one you're talking about because in that YouTuber Big Joel's like 2019 video, he did like, I'm gonna call it a retrospective on Anita Sarkeesian, and for some
Yeah.
reason he covered that video in his video, and he concluded that it was complete trash. It had nothing of substance to say at all. They couldn't even find examples of manspreading. They filled the video with just footage of men just sitting on public transportation. It was a completely worthless waste of time. We don't have to spend too much more on this. I feel like we both made our points.
No. I mean, I agree, but like, but the point that I'm just making is like, I don't know if like, I mean, I grabbed one quote from a BBC article and I haven't like read all of it or whatever, and like she also went on to talk about like how her feminism inspired her as well. So like, but there's a question of like, how much of the like, maybe part of the intent is to sort of get a reaction. I mean, but that's what good art does, is to get a reaction, even if the reaction is whether it's a laugh or like I mean, like, it's the same thing of like when the people hung the urinal on the wall and everyone was like, oh, this is what postmodern art has come to, and you have like Paul Joseph Watson like crying about it still to this day. You know, like there's an element of just like,
I mean, here's what you're saying. You're saying that the art is trolling, and honestly, as an internet troll, as a shitposter, I can kind of get behind art as trolling, but I think
I don't know how much I'm just reading into that BBC quote. It maybe it isn't a troll, but maybe it is. I don't know.
Well, I can tell you that she is like sincerely a feminist and was inspired by a project called Everyday Sexism, because
That's
I learned
the
this.
woman who wore the mattress or whatever.
Everyday. I don't think she had anything to do with this, as far as I know.
No,
was just a
maybe
project-
it's not Everyday Feminist. I think I read somewhere in there that like that also was on her mind when she did. That's the woman who wore the mattress on her back for an art project.
Oh, okay. It could be. I don't know. But she was inspired by a project called Everyday Sexism, and so she wanted to make a project about that. It's also possible that, you know, she wanted it to be like funny and kind of self-satirizing. Sure, and I can truthfully see that in the. I mean, they do seem like intentionally ugly chairs. I have to admit that.
Yeah.
So, I can get behind that, but my problem is that left media overemphasizes content like that, which not only is trollish, but specifically, whether they intend it or not, and I think they know, it trolls the left. Why if you want to troll someone, troll the right. If you're on the left and you're making content that trolls the left, you're doing it wrong. You need to be trolling the right. The right, I don't see them trolling themselves. They make content that trolls the left. They seem to understand this principle.
Yeah, I think framing in terms of troll is probably bad. It seems to me it's just light and funny rather than a troll. But not to say, but my thing is you made a comment there about how this is I don't know, some sort of problem on the left. And I still want to say I haven't done a rigorous study to analyze
I have also not done a rigorous
articles published from left-leaning magazines and see what articles get more clicks than not, and what and then try to do some sort of analysis to determine that in fact this is a problem, rather than maybe a possibility is that there's just some articles that get picked out of these things and tend to go viral on the right because those are the particular issues that enrage the right. And then the question, that gets back to an earlier question of what's the intent there? Did they do that purposely to attract the right? We still don't have the information to determine that either. So it's at the end of the day, what are we doing? If this was a problem, which I'm not even sure that it is a problem, I'm still not sure what to do about this problem, other than the fact that I agree with you to a certain extent, in terms of what you're saying about trolling the right, we need to deal with the right's misuse of information. And that's why it's rather than capitulating to them and telling these people to stop.
The way we deal with the right's misuse of information is by building an effective, weaponized narrative machine of our own. And we're not doing that. Instead, we're making articles about the manspreading chair and hey guys. That's my thesis right there.
No, but you say we're doing it. We're not. You and me aren't.
You and I are not, yeah.
And here's the thing is okay, maybe we're not as big as the cut, but again, I don't know that much about the cut, so I
don't either. I mean, I've read some articles on there. I see.
And my point is
the cut ran that article, that amazing article about the Harvard law professor who got swindled by two French ladies.
Oh, I don't.
Did you ever read that? Oh, amazing article.
My thing is just we need to carve out our spaces. I do agree with you to some extent. I feel the way that I would frame it is I feel a portion of the left or even the liberal media has sort of left the far right as a kind of joke and has ignored them in a certain way. And I think what the last 4 years hopefully has taught us, I don't know that we necessarily have learned this, but we need to take them seriously, and we need to make them obsolete again to a certain degree, right? In a way in which they've now involved themselves in the real world in a way that they haven't done in a very long time.
We got in a big internet flame war about defund the police. You want to give some background on that?
Yeah, I think part of our discussion surrounded to what
discussion
extent...
is a very civilized word.
Yeah, well, it got heated just because, to be honest,
sure.
I get frustrated.
Yeah. I hear you.
I mean no harm, but
I got you.
I think part of it was just on understanding, I got from you that you had an issue with the slogan. Now, I think there's more to the disagreement than that.
So you're an activist on this, right?
Yes. I mean, it's complicated. I wrote my master's issues involving criminal justice have interested me for a very long time, and I wrote my master's thesis. So I did philosophy, so it wasn't a sociological study or something like that, but it was questions surrounding the ethics of imprisonment.
Okay.
And my sort of end result is I'm in favor, at least morally speaking, in favor of sort of abolishing prisons. Now, obviously there's a ton to unpack there. So, but my sort of point point is that, and from that, to extend from that is on top of that, I'm also have issues with criminal justice generally, and I do come from a position where I think we need to overhaul the entire thing. I think sometimes the discussion gets bogged down in semantics, but we can get to that in a bit.
The discussion does get bogged down into semantics, but I don't think that the distinction between abolition and reform is semantics. I think it's a real distinction, and I think on the other side of the divide, because I would put myself as a reformer, on the abolition side, there's yet another division, because there are people like you, and I listened to your 1.5 hour stream about prison abolition, where you talked about, you know, your thesis and like where you stand on it, and I would put you at the
I'm definitely at an extreme. Like, I can admit to that.
I wouldn't, but see the thing, within prison abolition, you're not the extreme. There are actually people who are quite a bit more extreme than you, and in fact, you talked about re-envisioning police. There are a lot of hardcore prison abolitionists who ridicule that idea of like reimagining the police, and they say, no, we're abolitionists. What we say what we mean. We want to get rid of prisons. We want to get rid of police. We want to get rid of the criminal justice system. And what they're saying, and I think it's difficult to summarize it, and I doubt very many people would agree with me. But
I do want to say something though, because
okay, just let me finish the
point.
Yeah. Essentially, their thesis is that we should only address crime through systemic solutions like education and opportunity and equity, and not through law enforcement and jails and prisons. And I don't think that you are on the positions you laid out were not on that extreme. They were actually on the other side of that prison abolitionist divide, is how I read it.
Yeah, I can't remember exactly how I worded it, and I'm very it's quite possible I said things in ways that I didn't mean to say it, like stumbling over my words and such, because like these things are difficult to wrap your head around, and it does come down.
Why don't you just summarize your position here? Like, what do you mean by police abolition?
But I do just want to say that, like, even in explaining it here, the difficulty here, and the reason why I think that a lot of it is semantics, is because it's really difficult to come up with a language that describes a reimagining of what our criminal justice could look like.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
yep.
I don't know how many people, when they're talking about this, like, they might even object to the word criminal justice there, because criminal implies that there's this person who was the criminal or whatever. And so even there, sure, I might even agree with them that my system, how it would frame people who violate some sort of social standard or whatever you want to call that, might have to be dealt with. But whether that we treat them in the way that we treat criminals today is going to be radically different. And so part of that is like how you communicate that without using the language we've already borrowed from our current system.
See, I feel like the way you said it right there, like, I'm not saying you're a reformer, but I feel like you used reformer language right there. Like I would not, like, I'm a reformer, I would nod along with what you say. I have a big problems with how criminal justice is carried out, and I would like us to re-examine them in a very profound way.
See, but I've never, the funny thing is, like, this is why I think it's semantic, because, like, when I talk to abolitionists and people who agree with me that I would say are far to the side of, like, abolishing the police and abolishing the prison system, which I side with, I don't think they would refer to me as a reformer. The problem is, like, this is why I think the language of reform itself is kind of, like, in a way, meaningless, because it's like, I said this to someone, like, because I posted abolish, and they were like, well, what about reform? And it's like, okay, I want to reform the police until they're gone. You know, like, whether you call that, like, abolish or reform, and like, I even said this in the stream, which is like, I don't even care if, like, there's some component in how we do with societal violators or whatever you want to call them. Maybe there's going to be some historical connection with what we currently call police, such that we give these people who say, like, investigate murders, say we give them a label and call it police. But it is nothing substantially like we call police today. All I'm saying is, like, I don't care if we keep the word police or not in the end. What I care is that what we end up is going to be radically different than what we have now.
Do the people who investigate murders detain the culprits?
part of the difficulty of this discussion as well, and like I'm not saying this to avoid what you're asking, but it's just like it's hard to know what is perfectly going to work until we start making like steps towards that direction. And I don't even know if I want to make incremental steps. Like, I might be more open to some larger steps, but my point is, like, of course I want to see evidence coming in. I'm not going to be a stubborn person here and say abolish it, like 100% abolish for sure, because that's what we need. When, like, I don't know, going down the line, there might be some things that we didn't foresee that will need to have like things in place to correct things. So it's like detainment. Is there a way to do that ethically when dealing with someone who is suffering from arguably a mental health crisis in an instant? There might be ways to detain them without like certain types of force and like other things to make them less harmful to themselves and less harmful to the community. There are ways to do that currently.
So are you talking about like someone who's just like a mentally ill person who is like maybe causing a disturbance and possibly could be a danger to others? Because I thought we were talking about like someone investigating like a murder. Would they detain the murderer when they found the culprit?
Well, but even in that case, yeah, no. So that's fine. I might have gone off there. Even in that case, how would you detain them? What is the ethical way about going to detain them? Because part of it is like, yes, like I'm not going to be against any type of, I'm trying to think of like the wording here, because back when I was writing this, quarantine was like a commonly used word, but I don't know if it's going to have the same connotation today.
By the prison abolitionist people using quarantine. So if we're
some of them did, yeah.
Someone, so what we would mean there is that we would be preventing them from rejoining society at large through some kind of enclosure. It seems to me what that answer is getting at.
And it's not definite, and it comes with like, again,
okay.
it's a way of rethinking, because I don't, and here's the thing, is like, I'm not gonna.
Can I give you some advice? I feel like the big problem of the prison abolitionist movement is that they can't answer that question concisely. I feel like you guys would be doing yourselves a big favor if you could answer that question more decisively.
Yeah, I mean, I can give you my own answer. I guess like what I'm fumbling over is like, I don't want to.
So I was expecting
I know,
answer.
but like part of it is also like not speaking for the movement, because like the language that I use is not going to be the language that other uses, and obviously, anyways, my point is, so like I had a model of that I argued in my thesis, which was a retributive or a restitutive, rehabilitative, and restorative system. And so what that means, like, of course, so restitution is like sort of like paying back society in some way. So the best way to say it is like, I drive into your fence. There's got to be some way, however we do it. I would prefer it through some sort of like societal structure such that.
Now this is a civil disagreement.
Sure,
I destroy my fence.
But it can apply to other things, even ranging towards felonies in our current parlance, right? I'm just saying, like,
in our current system, like most, like someone driving into a fence doesn't usually actually involve the criminal justice system. People aren't usually arrested for that. Maybe if it was like under the influence or something.
Yeah, I mean, I'm using these as like vague outlines, right? So like restitutive just means that there's got to be a way of like repaying in some way when somebody like loses something, right? I mean, this also plays in restorative, but restorative often tends towards more of the psychological element, like to make the society whole for what wrong was committed.
It seems like to get to that point, though, you have to sort of skip over like a few steps. Like, what if the other person doesn't take responsibility for what they did? What if everyone saw me murder someone in the town square and I just go, nah, I didn't do it. You're all crazy.
Right. I mean, but this is why like there's going to be levels of how to treat people and how to analyze these things, because obviously not everyone is going to take responsibility in every case and whatever, right? And so then the question is like, what are we morally allowed to do to these people? And my response is that we're not morally allowed to have retributive justice towards people and things like this, in part because like
what would be an example of I don't know how to say that word, I'm sorry.
What
you just said.
Retributive punishment is the idea that
retributive punishment.
Yeah,
there we go.
Retribution, it's like you did something morally wrong and evil, and therefore you deserve some kind of punishment. And part of it is, this gets into like deep philosophical questions about determinism and how much we are free to make choices such that we have the free will available to outside of our own character, but also the social environment, able to make choices and stuff like this. And part of me is like, I don't even want to get into those questions. It's just like, I'll say, yeah, like all of it's involved. And so it's like, how much is someone responsible? It gets complicated. And so part of that is like, I don't think people deserve punishment for committing wrongs, because it's likely that there's societal or historical or biological reasons that maybe things have happened. So then what do we do with them? And part of my thinking is that like, best way to deal with them is to do it in non-retributive ways, non-punishment ways. But you also have to consider that you want to keep society safe in some respects.
That's the big question that I feel like abolitionists kind of overlook, that, yeah, a lot of our system is about punishment, but a lot of it's also about protecting people.
But I don't think this is why it's like I get confused, because like I don't know who you mean by abolitionists. So when I was doing my research, and this was only back in 2012, like the abolitionist research that I was talking about talked about safety. And here's the thing is that was coming more from the academic sector, and in particular in philosophy. But here's the thing is like when I read some of this activist writing, there's shades of the stuff that I researched in 2012. So it's not like I don't think we radically disagree. I think there's a lot more anger.
Do you know Miriam Kaba? I think her name is. She's a abolitionist whose name I've seen a lot. She wrote that Times op-ed. Yes, we literally mean abolish the police.
Yes, I'm aware of them, but I can't recall exactly what they have said, such that I would say that I agree or disagree with her on these points.
Okay, well, I mean, in my opinion, she has argued the position that we don't need police to protect us, because police don't protect us is her argument.
See, but I would agree with that.
What police do is uphold capitalism, according to her.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that.
Okay, but so we do or we don't need police to protect us?
No, but what I said is we need safety. I mean, it's a question of like whether or not the police are the best way to guarantee safety.
Oh, let's improve driving standards. Like yeah, that's great. But also the question of murderers is different than.
Well, I mean, it's going to be both, right? I mean, like, let's be real. Socioeconomic factors are going to implicate crimes, including murder, right? In the sense that
Absolutely.
If you can alleviate people's material conditions in such a way that they can live more healthier and stable lives, they might be more likely, are less likely to engage in types of behaviors such as murdering someone.
See, I don't think that's a controversial thing to say. I think that just about everyone would agree. Like, yeah, I mean, ideally, we just wouldn't have crime, and hopefully, we'll have that one day. But the problem is we radically disagree on how to get to that point.
Well, I don't even think it's that. I will even take it a step further.
I think we radically disagree on it. I don't mean you and I mean society as a whole. Like, you and me and a Trump supporter radically disagree on how to achieve that goal.
Well, yeah, and part of that is because a lot of people who are conservative or to the right are retributivists, right? They think people deserve punishment and stuff. Like, they're already not going to be willing to go down this path. But that aside, what I'm saying is like, in the end...
No, because a right-winger would make the case, I don't want to put words in anyone's mouth, but like, this is in keeping with some of their thinking. If we just made the death penalty the norm, then people would really not want to commit crimes because, the penalty is too high. Like, that would be a solution that they would advocate. I would argue against that.
But that's actually a utilitarian argument that even like leftists make. Or not leftists, sorry, like more like liberal types that believe that like I think Sam Harris would be for this even, although like I know he's pretty far to the right now, or he's in that atmosphere of center rightness, whatever you want to call it.
I would just call him a centrist, probably.
Yeah, but my point here is that like they're not going to get into the conversation. In terms, because like they're either going to think you're going to have the people on the far right that think that it's like some deserving thing, or you'll have some people who make some utilitarian argument. And the interesting thing about the utilitarian argument is there's evidence that can point to why that actually doesn't work, right? I mean, there's a question of whether it's morally just based on like how we treat people, for the argument that I made earlier. But then there's also the question of, does it work practically speaking? Like, it turns out that we have the death penalty and people are still murdering away. So there's there's a question there of whether it's effective. But what I was saying is, like, getting back to like my original thing that I was talking about, which is in terms of like, we reach a system where, okay, we fixed a lot of socioeconomic factors, which I think should be part of this discussion, which I actually think the sort of like defund the thing gets to, but we can get to that in a second. So we fix some of our material circumstances, and yet maybe we still have murder.
I mean, every society has had violent crime and murder, so I think the idea that we're gonna just not have murder if we fix our material conditions, I think is a little wishful thinking.
Right, exactly. Which is why it's like, I think when activists are talking about this now, when they say we need to live in a world without police, it's because they're talking about police now. Now, I'm not saying I want police in the future, because again, as I said, what I'm envisioning is going to be there to help us when we've fixed material conditions and all these other things. That thing might not even be even close to what we imagine police are today. Maybe historically, because it shares some various roles. What
would the major distinction be between the hypothetical police of the future that might be okay and the current year police?
Why they're getting involved, how they engage, what their purpose is, right? That's why, like, when you mentioned what this person said, safety. I don't think that police today, their purpose is safety, and I can argue that point with you.
I mean, so we were talking earlier about broken window policing, something you and I both think is ghastly and basically based on debunked sociology. The people who were carrying that out and victimizing people were claiming that they were protecting safety. They're like, oh yeah, it turns out that, if you police people for broken windows, then there's less murder, so we're doing safety right now.
It wasn't, though, was it?
Well, I don't think it had the correct effect, because I think that it was based on bad science and an authoritarian mindset. But we're talking about purpose. We're not talking about how they did it. We're talking about purpose. You said their purpose would be different. The stated
right. So here's
reason for police today is safety.
So let's ignore the fact that the people who came up with broken policing, a lot of them had involvement with the American Enterprise Institute and all that fun stuff. And just push that aside.
I don't even see the relevance of that, though.
Well, the relevance is like that comes from a think tank that bred the sort of like connect biological race ideas and connecting them with IQ and linking crime to race.
We agree that the science is terrible, though.
Yes, but let me get to my point. So these theories came out of this network, and it was adopted by police. And so the question that I'm saying, or the thing that I'm trying to elicit here, is the reason why it was adopted by police was not necessarily because they thought it was some pragmatic thing to do, that it was going to improve safety, but it was a way of policing black people. And that's why they adopted those strategies. It's the same reason they adopted the war on drugs. And like Nixon was at least way more explicit about it. We have him on tape for why he adopted the war on drugs. And it had nothing to do with like... Tape? It was obviously to lock up black people.
Now you've gotten you're like a defund police guy, right? Like that's the thing that we originally got in an argument about. I did like the slogan "defund the police."
Yeah, the argument was more around the slogan rather than like. I guess we can get into that.
To me, defund the police is it's a slogan, but it's also a definition of the goals of a movement, and it also defines who makes up the coalition. I have a friend, Kyle. He's my podcast partner, and he actually is, unlike me, who sits at home all day. He actually volunteers in his community, doing, among other things, prison abolition work, and he's deeply distrustful of. He was telling me that he's become kind of distrustful of the slogan, defund the police, because it seems to water down their message in an attempt to reach across to like liberals and reformers. And because I was thinking about that, I found that it's deleted now, but there's a really great thread that had been quote tweeted by Jamie from Majority Report.
Yeah.
From an anonymous abolitionist activist. His @ was abolition, police abolition rat. No, abolish police rat. That was it. And he was talking about how that slogan appeared suddenly, really kind of against the wishes of a lot of the activists, and how he described it as sort of a failed attempt to build a bridge with liberal reformers.
Out of all the arguments against the slogan, I think I am more sympathetic to this one.
Mm-hmm.
The thing, and part of that is like I don't.
But the argument actually goes both ways. Like it applies just as much to the reformers. So when Jamie was talking about this, and she was like, "This makes me think that we should go back to." If people think that defund the police is bad, then I'm just going to go back to abolition. I feel like she meant it as an ultimatum, but it's actually just a perfectly rational course of action.
To me, but this
is
is
what
why
you should do.
Yeah, but this is why, strategically, I thought or defund had some merits, because it was a way of promoting, I think, a step towards abolishment without needing to tell people that what we're doing is with the end point in mind gonna reach abolishment. And what I mean by that is,
I agree exactly with what you just said.
And I don't mean that to be kind of nefarious, because I'm going to be honest. Throughout the whole time, I always was saying abolish police. I used defund because I also like the idea of that is a practical goal that we can start to do right now.
But you do agree that there were a lot of kind of liberal types who were like, oh, abolish doesn't mean, I mean, defund doesn't mean abolish, and they were kind of kidding themselves, weren't they?
No, I can agree with that. I think anyone who said
that the liberals were kidding themselves.
Or I don't even know kidding themselves. I think they were playing their own games of co-opting a message for sure. That's part of.
I think that's true. Yeah.
I think part of any of these sloganeering stuff, that's the thing. With slogans, I wasn't wedded.
The reason we need it though is because we have to build. Politics is about building coalitions, right?
Right, but this is what gets back to me with the pragmatic thing, which is locally in our own Black Lives Matter movement here in London, Ontario. We're currently pushing against our city council to defund the police. And that is a practical step that we can take. And yes, you can look at it as reform if you want to, but part of me is I'm sorry, we're not going to have the revolution right now.
So by defund the police, do you mean reallocate resources?
Yes, but I think I see that as the same thing. I know people quibble over this.
What drives me kind of crazy about it is it takes a goal and frames it. It frames the goal as almost an austerity goal. We're spending too much on the police, whereas my goal is justice. And to me, if we can improve justice by reallocating funds from the police to other things, then I'm all for that. But if it turns out that a better way to promote justice and equity is to increase funding of police, I'm open to that too. Because my goal isn't how much money we're spending on police, which is almost like a conservative framing. My goal is better equity and justice, which I think is a left-wing goal.
Yeah, I just don't part of this is when it gets to the slogan, what are slogans meant to do? So there's several things to unpack here. One
slogans are meant to communicate your idea to others, simply.
You see, but I don't agree. I think it's partly to be catchy, and then because part of it is
ideas is good.
Yeah, but part of it is ideas are going to be complex. Reallocating funds from police into community programs to affect the material conditions of people and prevent the over policing of black neighborhoods and stuff like that. Those are interesting ideas, and as you said, we might have buy-in with you on that. this slogan, like part of it is, I don't know about who exactly coined it such that it gained the traction it did, and whether it was the liberals that supplanted it in these organizations or whatever. The point being is that a lot of these movements started saying it. And so then the question is like, it was a good thing to chant in the street for a lot of people, to draw on the ground. It was a good way to say what we want to do is defund the police. And then whenever people were asked, they would explain, well, what we mean is we want to defund, take these funds away from the police, defund them, shrink their budget, and then reallocate it to other areas, and they would go into the details and explain that. But like, part of it is like, I don't know how you then go in reverse and then say, I'm going to come up with a new slogan that I think is strategically better, whether it's reallocate the funds or like whatever slogan we come up with, and then somehow convince activists all over the country to start adopting this new slogan, you know?
Imagine if Bernie Sanders had sold Medicare for all as cancel healthcare. Like, that to me sort of portrays in a nutshell what the problem here is. Like, because that kind of is, like, in fact, most people's private coverage, they would lose it because they'd have Medicare for all. But like, that's obviously not how you frame it.
I'll give you an olive branch in the sense that I see what you're saying in terms of defund seemingly being like an austerity thing, even though the intent behind it is not austerity, right? I can see what you're saying, but like, I still don't think. And here's the thing: it's like, I'm not wedded to defund. Obviously, I'll be chanting "abolish the police."
You were pretty adamant about it in the chat. I have to say, you were pretty adamant about it.
Actually,
in the chat.
what I was adamant about was whether or not the slogan had an effect on down ballot races, and we can talk about that if you want to. But like, I'm not wedded to the slogan as the thing that I just think. So my reason for getting mad about, so I'm mad about the discourse about the slogan, if that makes sense.
Okay.
And the reason why
that
I'm mad about the discourse about the slogan is that it's like, I don't have control over that almost. Like, again, like, I don't know how to come, like, what am I going to come up with a catchy ass slogan and then somehow convince activists to start shouting it? Like, it's already out of my hands. The activists have already taken and using it. So then for me, it's like, I care about what I can do. And what I can do is work with my local activists to actually reallocate funds away from the police and give them to things that are going to materially benefit people. That's something I can do.
So
it's like, I don't care about this.
Just to reiterate, you don't think you're amoral if you are against the slogan defund the police?
No. When I was having this discussion with you online, I had in that chat, I had the impression that you were against reallocating or all the things that you just said now that you agree. And my intent, actually, before we even started this conversation, was really just to ask you, what is your position really? Because it was so unclear to me.
Well, it would make sense that it was unclear because I never actually put forward a position. And to be fair to me, no one ever asked me my position. It's like, what's your position on policing? Which is, I'm a reformer. I want to militarization of the police, I think is terrible and needs to end. Private prisons, I think is terrible and needs to end. Slave labor from prisoners is an actual atrocity, I think, and a moral imperative that we end that immediately. Over-policing, I think, is a huge problem. I don't think our society does nearly enough to address the systemic causes of crime, which are, lack of opportunity, lack of education, that kind of thing. I think we would be much better off in investing in that stuff. And also, I think it is bad that our society uses police as first responders in all of these like random things. Many times, sending a guy in with a gun is just the worst guy you can send. And now with body cameras, we see this stuff all the time. There was a horrific video footage I saw of it was just a traffic stop. It was a traffic stop. The lady, I don't know what her problem was. She freaked out. I think it was a lady, and she freaked out, and the cop like tackles her basically, and she gets his gun, and then the guy's dead. The cop died because she had some freak out. There was no reason. It was just a completely senseless act of violence. And if our society most of what police do does not require a guy with a gun. Some of it does, but most of it doesn't. And we should rethink how we respond to these.
Yeah, we had a guy in Mississauga who was having a mental health issue and was in his apartment and had a knife on him, but there was no one in the apartment. All he could hurt was himself at this point.
Yeah.
And the family was pleading with the police officers to talk with him and provide mental health assistance to this person. And instead what they did was climb up the back porch, break open the window, fire, and kill them.
The outcomes of police interactions with people who are with mental illness, with problems like that, they're just abysmal, and we know about them. Yeah. But it should be common sense to rethink our approach to these things, because there's a lot of senseless violence that just doesn't need to happen.
I mean, it gets to it of just like, do you think that defund the police hurt down ballot Democrats? Can we discuss that, or did you want to?
Yeah, I do want to discuss that, because I heard you talk about this on your live stream. In fact, you were like, "Oh, I got in a big argument on Twitter with someone who
it wasn't
was
you.
Defending that position." Oh, okay. I was gonna ask that, because I did not defend that position. So
no. These were like resistant libs. Yeah.
Okay, so my thoughts on this are a little complicated. So the person who most loudly made this accusation was a member of Congress who I followed somewhat closely, named Abigail Spanberger. She's she just got reelected to her second time in a swing district. It was a Republican in that seat before her, and Abigail Spanberger is the type of Democrat who doesn't want to run on any politics, and that's not an exaggeration. If it were up to Abigail Spanberger, she would run on, every Democrat would run on saying, we're going to make jobs and America is great. And more women fighter pilots. She's an ex-CIA, so
more
she's probably
women
into that
CEOs.
Stuff. Yeah. Just to give you an idea of who Abigail Spanberger is and why I'm interested in her. So she ran in her district, and her big thing was that she's anti-Pelosi, and her when she got into Congress, she would not vote for Nancy Pelosi for Speaker. And the only other issue she was willing to run on was the ACA, Obamacare. How does that make sense? There is no Democrat in the country she wanted to save the ACA. There is no Democrat in the country more responsible for passing the ACA, other than Barack Obama, who she also ran against, by the way, than Nancy Pelosi. This woman is terrified of policy, terrified of principles, of any kind of ideology, and there's a whole bunch of Democrats like her. When she finally did get to the Congress, she made good on her promise to not vote for Nancy Pelosi. She wrote in, there wasn't even another candidate, so it was just a purely symbolic gesture. She wrote in the name of her colleague, Cheri Bustos. Do you know who Cheri Bustos is?
No.
Cheri Bustos is head of the DCCC. It was her job to elect Democrats to the House of Representatives in 2020. All of this, it's all her. It was her fuck up. The buck stops with her. And who is she? She's in one of these swing districts in Illinois. There's a piece about her in This American Life that I highly recommend. And basically, Cheri Bustos doesn't want to talk about defund the police. Cheri Bustos doesn't want to talk about trans rights. Cheri Bustos doesn't want to talk about Medicare for all. Cheri Bustos also doesn't want to talk about abortion. That's a direct quote from her from this article. She doesn't want to talk about anything. She doesn't want to run on issues. They are issue-free Democrats. So the idea that these people are pointing the way forward for Democrats is completely corrupt. If you think that these people are going to save you, you are being taken for a ride. They are just their own unique form of terrible, and they are as big a problem. They are a bigger problem than Democrats than defund police will ever be. And furthermore, I'm sure you do. I completely reject the idea that a candidate in Missouri or Illinois or Virginia can blame AOC for losing a seat. That just doesn't make sense. It's your job to sell your message, right? Like, it's Abigail Spanberger's job to get elected. And the idea...
No, it's like if AOC messages to her constituency things that are going to get her elected, that's not her fault. That Spanberger couldn't win her or she did, but was challenged at winning her constituency.
The worst example of this is Claire McCaskill, who said the exact same. I don't know. She did talk about defund the police, but she lost her election in Missouri in 2018. It's funny because like a big part of that was actually the guy who was in the seat that Cori Bush won, actually. So it's funny that Cori Bush was kind of a spillover from the Claire McCaskill debacle in 2018 in an indirect way. But Claire McCaskill distanced herself from economic legislation, like ballot legislation, that was popular and passed. Like stuff like, I think, like raising the minimum wage, that kind of thing. That stuff passed in Missouri in the same election where she ate shit. And she campaigned, again, she went around, I don't know if this is what she campaigned on, but she went around talking about how crazy the squad was and how these crazy Democrats are bad. Well, guess what? If you tell voters that Democrats are crazy, they're not going to vote for you, the Democrat. I live in a really blue state that same election re-elected our Republican governor by a huge percentage. I saw Charlie Baker's advertisements. He wasn't on TV saying, "Oh, that Trump guy, he's really crazy." He never mentioned Trump. The only time he mentioned Trump on the campaign was when he was asked about him in a debate. And he just changed the subject quickly. Every advertisement for Charlie Baker that I saw was the same. It was people going, "I'm a Democrat and I'm voting for Charlie Baker." That was it. That was every Charlie Baker ad. But Claire McCaskill doesn't understand that, so she goes around and badmouths Democrats and then wonders why they send her packing. Well, because you're a representative of people you just told us are crazy. So these people are awful. I hate these people. But that doesn't mean that there aren't some problems with defund the police. I mean...
Well, I just want to say that too. McCaskill disappointed me the most because actually when she was in power, there was one moment as well where like she grilled Dr. Oz in the Senate and it was fucking beautiful.
Dr. Oz?
Oh yeah, she destroys
Really?
Dr. Oz.
Damn.
And it made me like
destroyed by Claire McCaskill.
No, it was so beautiful, and like I remember going like, oh, this Dr. Claire McCaskill seems pretty awesome, and then like once I got to know her better, I was like,
narrator voice. She's not.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I guess I'm curious to see because like I agreed with everything you said there, obviously. And I don't.
That was a long rant. Sorry for going off on a
No,
tear
I mean,
there.
like, but it's fair. I mean, like, these people piss me off too, and like, cause like my biggest issue here too, like that I made it in my stream was like that these resistant libs are like trying to argue with me. It's like part of it is like I think that you have to go in the ground game that you have, which is like Republicans are going to message against you, and you're going to have to like find a way to either like overcome their messaging or like deal with it in a way, right? But I don't know if you can like springboard off of that.
So I feel like there's a parallel between what you just said there and what Abigail Spanberger is saying. Both of them kind of suppose that right-wing messaging dictates to us our message. And I think that the answer is that we have to control our message. And if we don't control our message, then we've already lost.
Yeah, so I'll just clarify. I wasn't just like... Because like this is how I worded it to these people too. Where it's like I don't even... As I said before in the last conversation we were having... in this conversation about defund the police generally, which is that like I'm not sure that I'm the one who can craft a different slogan and get activists to adopt it. Similarly, I don't think Spanberger, I can't remember her name.
That's close enough.
I don't think she is in the place, given her politics, that she can craft a slogan and get activists in her district to adopt her version of the slogan, right? So part of what I'm saying is she has to deal with on the ground the fact that activists in her district are going to be saying one thing. She also has to deal in her district how the Republicans are going to use the activists against her, and all of this, just like the Republicans have to deal with whatever Jenner whatever she comes up with, and they have man. like the point is like if you do nothing as you just described her, then of course like you're gonna do worse. Like you gotta do something, you gotta message, you gotta bring something forward. And so it's like it annoyed me that for them to blame defund the police for why like some down ballot Democrats lost, because like I'm not going to deny that it didn't play some factor. Obviously it might have. It's just the fact of like it being this deciding factor. It's like, no, show some like gumption, do something beyond just complaining after the fact, you know.
And what I kind of want to splinter off to a point where I kind of end the love fest and argue against some of this stuff, but and then part of me wants to just continue the hate train. But the mainstream corporate Democrats are not good at messaging. They have no business like trying to be like, oh, you guys don't understand this stuff. You're really making some mistakes. Look at Joe Biden's messaging. It was awful. It was absolutely god awful. On fracking, the guy couldn't just stand up and clearly articulate a position. He kept running away from it. You know, like he was obviously, I feel like his position on everything was to run away. Court packing is another thing. Like he couldn't just come out and say, my position is this. He would end up running away from it. At one point he said that he didn't want to answer because he didn't want to change focus. Well, not answering changes focus. You have to have a position on the topics when you're running for president. Why don't you get that? I don't understand. God, they fucking suck.
Yeah. When are we gonna do the fighting?
Yeah. I didn't vote for Biden, by the way. I because I don't live in a swing state. I decided to vote for
Joe.
Howard
Did you
Hawkins.
vote? Okay.
I did not vote for Joe. I am not a believer in the Green Party. I think that they're not a real party. I did not think they were going to reach 5%, but you know, it was a thing I could do, so I voted for Howie Hawkins. Sorry, Joe Jorgensen. Better luck next time.
I've never seen what they look like, and we played a game on like Jackbox TV where one of my friends drew them as this purple creature. So now whenever we talk about Joe Jorgensen, that's the image I have in my face or in my head.
I know what Joe Jorgensen looks like because I watched an interview with her on the Brett Weinstein podcast.
Oh God,
where she was interviewed. Did you follow that at all? Do you know that that at one point
his Unity Party thing or whatever the hell that was?
Yeah. He wanted Joe Jorgensen to take her name off the Libertarian ballot and put his name.
Oh, Jesus Christ! Yeah. Delusions of grandeur. That one. Jesus.
To be fair, it wasn't his name. It was the name of whoever their movement drafted. But I mean, it's still a completely ridiculous idea. Why would she?
Yeah.
Why would she put your name on the ballot? It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. I guess I have a point of contention I can raise, maybe.
Okay, go for it.
Which is one other thing that I got from the conversation, and I might be wrong, and it's aside from the fact of like the earlier things we discussed, where like I might agree with you that maybe defund isn't the best strategy, or it doesn't quite fit what we want to communicate or something like that. Putting all that aside, one thing that annoys me is currently when people talk about the effectiveness of this slogan. And the reason why it annoys me is because like in the time span of how these things work, like it really started only gaining traction around June of this year. And so it's like, it's hard for me, even in the context of the election, to say like activists should have known better without like creating a slogan that would have caused problems at this election that was going to come up or whatever. But it's like long term, I don't know that the slogan has been ineffective. Like who knows like how things are going to change. Just like a lot of the slogans in past social movements were initially unpopular and eventually gained support. And so it's like, it seems weird to me to already be reflecting on the effectiveness of this slogan, which I felt like you were kind of doing in the chat that we had, where it's like, I don't know, give it some time, you know?
Okay. Earlier today when I was thinking about this, I thought of a really good way of explaining what I see the shortcomings of this. So I was Googling this and I was just trying to find out like what support was in specifically Minneapolis. And I found here's an article I found. Both of these point to a poll. I don't have the name of the poll. But here, the first one is from the Star Tribune. So these are both from local Minneapolis media. So two articles written on the same day, October 15th, that said opposite things. One said that a majority supported defund the police, and the other said that a majority opposed defund the police. And the difference was how the question was phrased.
Yeah.
Right? This is not surprising. Everyone who follows politics and this kind of things understands. One asked people if they support reallocating funds to other things. A majority, or more people than not, supported it. The other question asked if they support reducing police. That got less support. So the popularity depends on how we phrase it. And the success of the initiative will depend on the voter. When they think defund police, do they think reallocate funds, or do they think fewer police? Because the answer to that question is going to be the answer to whether or not this is successful. And this is why how we phrase things matters.
Yeah, but this seems to me the wrong way to look at it, because if the slogan was actually reallocating police, and let's just say that that's catchy in the same way defund is, that like people start chanting it in the streets or whatever, so reallocate the resources, whatever they're chanting. Now let's say that's out in the ether, and then now the Republicans start running like they want to reallocate funds away from our police who need these resources more than ever, or like whatever the Republican ads might be. And then you're going to see the same thing. Like, you're going to see a tanking in support.
Right.
Part of this is just like...
But surely our phrasing should emphasize the thing that is popular and not the thing that's unpopular, right?
Yeah, but...
Like, it goes back to what I said about Bernie Sanders. Imagine if Bernie Sanders went around campaigning for cancel healthcare. No, don't campaign on cancel healthcare. Campaign on the thing that's popular.
Like, maybe. I'd have to think more about that one. Just in terms of, like, because you sprung this upon me today, and I thought, like, that was an interesting argument, that it seems to be more, like, negative than about the positive. And I'm like, I can get behind that argument. I guess, like, what I'm saying is, like, part of it is, like, the element that I brought up earlier, which is, like, I don't know if we're too far gone for that to work, or whether, or for it to, like, gain traction. I mean, like, defund is, like... seems to be sticking around for a little bit, but my point is, like,
I feel like it's on its way out, because I keep seeing people from both sides being like, yeah, this isn't really working. Like that's what I thought was interesting about that that abolish police rat thread. Like this is coming from someone very much in the abolition camp and who seems to be very active in this measure and saying like, yeah, this was something that we tried and it just kind of didn't work. You refer to defund the police as like strategic because it like reaches out to abolitionists, but see that my thing is that like
I think what it does is it bridges it bridges some ground. Not that it reaches out to abolitionists. What I'm saying is that it is a practical thing that we can do now that both abolitionists and non-abolitionists can get aboard with that. And what I mean by that is, like, of course, like you said, defund does not pull well or whatever, but the idea of reallocating, which really I think is really what this phrase is trying to constitute. What I'm saying is that the abolition people might see that as a step on its way to abolition, where the non-abolitionists might not want to take it all that way, but will like agree with the initial steps made in that direction. And for me, that's what makes it, if it worked that way, and again, like I'm still wavering over the effectiveness, but like.
But the downside to it is that you end up with a bunch of people being like, oh yeah, it doesn't really mean abolish police, and then you have half the people going, yes, it does, and that other half, the abolitionists, they're not enough people, so winning them over at the expense of a larger group of people who would support investing in education and crime prevention and after-school activities, those people end up getting alienated. It's a trade-off that doesn't make sense. Yeah, but
I don't buy that argument too, because again, like all this is why like slogans, again, like I find the discourse just annoying, which is that like part of it is in the discussing. I would never like hide the fact, like this is why like it's not like a nefarious plot to me. It's just like, look, we agree on this top line thing now. I can ally with you now to get the thing that I want in the immediate, like now. But that doesn't mean I'm going to stop my advocating further down the line for something to go even further, right? And I can be honest about that because just like, isn't this the true dream? This is the whole like compromise thing. It's the realization of like, I have to work with the libs. So it's like, if I could find out a way to at least get you on board a little bit, and then maybe I could slowly move you in my direction. It's at least try to give it a try. Because right now, I don't think we have the numbers in terms of leftists to just immediately get what we want. I mean, like we're even struggling to get defunding to happen, right? To reallocate those resources. Like it's a struggle. And so part of me is like, if you can get that buy-in from people who are not as far left as me, I'm down for that. I don't think that's compromising my morals because it's in the direction where I want to head. It might not go all the way that I want it to, but at least if it gets them part of that way. I mean, and then the further question is just whether or not that's effective or not, which I think is like part of the argument. And you make a good point. I also don't know how much like whether or not we have control to change the message already. Maybe you're right. Maybe it's going out. I don't know. But then at the end of the day, like maybe it does catch on, and like more things will happen that we don't foresee right now, or all of a sudden you'll have more people on board walking in the streets chanting defund, and we actually get some momentum here. I don't know. That's but maybe you're right. You got me thinking, at least on that point, about how it's like more negative sounding and how that could like lean into like some austerity stuff. And that's an interesting argument, and I'll take it into consideration.
Cool, man. I was actually gonna make a point that like draw a parallel between defund police and like the conservative push for defunding public schools, which they branded as school choice.
Yeah.
You know, like I think there's an interesting parallel there, but you know, I think that's really just repeat territory we went over.
No, and actually, I will say that like you make a good point, that and what you're framing there. Again, like I don't remember that coming up in our Twitter exchange.
Well, it was impossible because it was just a free for all in the group chat. You know, just a completely, and I didn't know it at the time. Also, that's another thing. I learned this by researching the topic a little bit, which I had researched the topic before, but
yeah, and not only that, like
researched it.
I'll be completely honest on something, which is that I came into that discussion already having to deal with some of these resistance libs types. So like I definitely was not in like the most charitable mindset, I will say.
Got it. Also, I don't know if you remember this, but what prompted that conversation was a Sam Harris tweet, and I think that also poisoned the well.
Yeah. Oh my God, yeah, exactly.
All right, man. So the question was friends or enemies. I think that we've reached friendship.
I mean, like I think the second half is more friendly. The second half is definitely a lot more conciliatory than the first half. I think we still might have disagreements.
Yeah. But you know, the second half is also the more substantial thing. The first half, you know, that's some kind of fun internet drama. You know, because fun times talking about YouTubers, talking about internet dramas. I like to use, like, my vision for the show is to kind of use like crazy things happening on Twitter and like funny personalities as like a jumping off point for like more serious like theory and principles and you know, stuff like that. So I think that we nailed it. We did a great job. Yeah.
Pat ourselves on the back.
Oh yeah, we did 2.5 hours, man. Oh man, I gotta.
Oh, I know.
I always shoot myself in the foot by going too long.
I feel for you. Yeah.
Yeah, man. Hey, thanks a lot for talking to me. This was great. This went exactly how I had hoped it would go, and we'll talk again soon. All right, cool. I'm hitting stop.